Hey, everybody. It is Patrice Enruga, and I am here with the Center for Economic Opportunity at Independent Women's Forum. Happy last week of September. And we're ending the month with our monthly policy chat. Now, today's topic is going to be so much fun. I know you guys are going to have a lot of comments and a lot of feedback, so looking forward to diving in. But just a couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost, if you do not subscribe to our newsletter, the pointer, you need to. I don't know what you're waiting on. So make sure you go to our website at IWF/CEO, for short for Center for Economic Opportunity. And you will have a sign up there where you can sign up for our monthly newsletter. And we actually just launched a mid-month kind of checkpoint. We call it the midpoint. So all of our analysis on tech, labor, and broad economic policy. All right, let's get to it. So recently, I came across a Bloomberg article entitled, quote, "Women who stay single and don't have kids are getting richer." And it was this eye-opening read about women who are choosing not to get married and not to have children. Now they're freezing their eggs, so I guess maybe in the future all bets are off. But it really got me thinking. And I actually shared it with the IWF policy team, about the different types of lifestyles that women are choosing today. You've got married women who have children. You have married women who don't have kids. You have single women who are raising kids of their own, having kids, and then you have single women who, like in this article, are not having kids at all. And the article seems to suggest that if you are a single, childless woman, that you, number one, are out earning single men, childless men, and men and women with kids, which is not exactly the case. So, let's just say if you're a single woman without kids, you're getting about $65,000 in wealth. That's how much you build up. But you kind of go down the line, and it seems like other women in different types of lifestyles are building up or generating far less wealth. Whether that's true is another story. But I think what really struck me is it glorifies this single, childless women, female lifestyle. And hey, we all get to make choices. And I think it's fantastic that we live in an economy where, as a woman, you can choose to pursue whatever economic opportunities you want to pursue, or whatever career path you want to pursue. It also has some implications on your fertility. Those choices are going to have implications on, marriage, and whether you choose to pursue marriage, whether you're able to find suitable partners. And so I really wanted to dive into kind of the economics of this. What are the tax implications? What's really going on with the wealth story? I mean, should I just get divorced and boot my kids to the corner if I want to have more wealth in the future? Somehow, I don't think so. So here to help me figure this out are two fabulous ladies. Beverly Halberg is a senior fellow with IWF. She hosts our podcast, She Thinks, which is also another one for your podcast list. Please don't forget to follow She Thinks. Beverly is fantastic. She is the reason why I am such a strong spokesperson on TV and radio. She is the president of District Media Group, and she is an expert coach, lecturer, public speaker, and trainer for folks like me. Also joining us is Carrie Sheffield. She is a senior policy analyst here at IWF, and she works on the CEO issues with me. Carrie is a fabulous woman. If you do not see her on TV, you need to start following her. She has had many lives before coming to IWF. She worked for Moody's. She worked for Goldman Sachs. She worked for the American Enterprise Institute. And we also almost worked together at Generation Opportunity back in the day. But Carrie is a writer. She's a lecturer. She is a former broadcaster, and she has lots of great opinions on this topic today. So, ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
All right. So this is interesting. I think Carrie, you laid it out really well. I'm a married mom with kids. Beverly is a married mom without kids. And then Carrie, you are a single woman without kids. So we've got a lot of the different perspectives covered in today's topic. And I can't wait for you guys to hit some of the different angles. But you all read the article. This Bloomberg article, and I would just love your initial reactions to it. And why don't we start with Beverly, and then Carrie, you round us out?
Yeah, and just for context about the being married and single, so I got married actually yesterday is my year anniversary. So I'm recently married, got
Right.
married at age
Congratulations.
41. Thank you. I'm 42 now. So I'm somebody who did live that career life before marriage. So when I was reading this, I had a few thoughts. First thought I had was money isn't everything. So if what the ultimate goal is making a lot of money, and there's nothing wrong with that if somebody chooses to do that. I thought you set it up really well, Patrice, by saying everybody has different choices that they make in life. And so some people that may be what their goal is, but what I have found, not just for myself, but for my many other single friends that I knew in Washington, D.C. and across the country that I just met through my work, most people do desire to have a spouse, to have a companion at some point in time. And many of them, not all, but many of them also desired to have children at some point in time. That's why the discussion, especially in my mid 30s with my friends, it was about, do you freeze your eggs or do you not? That became the conversation if one wasn't married yet. What do we do about this situation? So there's that first thought that I had of just, is making money the ultimate goal for most women? I would argue that it isn't. And even beyond that, what I have found is being a married person is actually being married has helped me financially. You then have a second income to help you pay the bills. You have somebody else that you can share different burdens with financially, even thinking of somebody else with the utility bill that you have, helping with household chores. So I don't have to hire somebody out to fix things. My husband is very handy. It comes in very, very nicely when things break around here. So I just don't think it took in the full perspective of what women want, even if statistically it is true that women make more money when they're not married and don't have kids.
Awesome.
No, those are all very good points. One big takeaway I had from this article is that I just hope this data, because this is Bloomberg, a very large, respected media organization, and the data that you touched on, Patrice, for women versus men. Men without children, their net worth is $57,000. Single women without, so that was single men without children, $57,000. Single women without children, their net worth was $65,000. So can we forever now put to bed this war on women myth? I think it's been like, it's a dead horse, it's beaten, it doesn't exist, and this data shows it. That's it. So we hear it over and over that, we need to have special, thumb on the scale because women were victims and we need to be treated with kid gloves, that we need to be promoted even if we aren't necessarily qualified, that we need to have quotas on, boards and things like that. This data says that it's not true. Now, the data also shows that if you are a single woman and you have children, your net worth is considerably less than a single man with children. So it showed that single women with children had a net worth of only $7,000 and a single man without children is $59,000. And this chart here is something else in addition. And it talks about kind of basically the luxury of being a stay-at-home mom. And this showed that if you are on the upper end of the income scale, there are 46% of these women whose husbands make $250K or more. They basically have this luxury of staying home. Mm-hmm. And then you on the lower end of the scale, and I know we'll get more into the poverty programs and what it means for wealth and things like that later in the conversation. But it's so interesting that it's this U shape, that it's really the middle class women who are having to work. And because of our social safety net and welfare programs, there are fewer lower income women who are working compared to middle class. I just found it very interesting.
I mean, I think that's really interesting. And I know you're going to get a little bit more into kind of the poverty angle, but my initial reaction was, I thought of some people call it the rich auntie vibe, which is, particularly in the Black community, women who are unmarried without children. And, rich aunties, they travel everywhere all the time. They wear the latest designer stuff. And it's like they play like Santa Claus or Mrs. Claus to all of their aunts and all of their nieces and nephews. And while I see the rich aunties having a fun, outwardly fabulous lifestyle on Instagram, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of women who still struggle with, but I still want to be married. And I would trade away all of the wealth. I would trade away traveling to be able to save, to have the money to put towards having a baby. So, I mean, I think while the article, I guess, is meant to boost this lifestyle, for those who choose to pursue it, I think it's not realistic in recognizing, as I think something you said, Beverly, which is that in a lot of women still have those deep down desires for partners, for to have a spouse and to have children in the future. So there's a huge cultural aspect while there's an economic aspect. So Carrie, I want to pick up with you and what you were talking about on in terms of kind of the poverty aspect of this. When you look at wealth and income, I'm glad that you kind of debunked a little bit what that article was talking about when the article suggested if you're at the top of the wealth scale if you are a single childless woman. But what about married women with children, or what about married women overall? So talk to us a little bit more about kind of where the wealth breakdowns are for women, when it comes to income. And then also I think you can touch a little bit on just from the poverty standpoint, where do a lot of these different types of women in different lifestyles fall?
Yeah, no, I thought the article was very myopic in that sense. And I say this as one of those childless aunties that have, 4 nieces and nephews. And I started my own business, and then I was in the hospital because I worked too hard. So I'm kind of the crazy auntie. But I did travel a lot. In fact, I visited every continent, including Antarctica, before I turned 30. So I turned 30 in Australia.
Wow.
And I grew up in a very conservative Mormon family where, in BYU culture, my undergrad was Brigham Young. The average, marriage age is way lower than the rest of the country. When I was at BYU, it was maybe like 22 or 23 for the women and maybe 24, 23, 25 for men. So considerably lower. And so there was this intense pressure. And I left the LDS church and I kind of threw it all away. And I was like, forget that. I want to go and, see the world and travel. And now I'm 39 and single, but I do have a great boyfriend and we're talking about getting married and we do want to have kids. So we are working on that. And we both have that goal of being parents. So the hope is that we're going to be able to achieve that. But the question about this article, I thought it was like blinders. It's like, okay, we're just gonna focus on single childless women and single childless men without looking at the net worth of, as Beverly touched on, married families and married women. And the reality is that marriage is very good for both men and women. And it's very good for women. There have been multiple studies to show this. So the Federal Reserve, they looked at the fact that, for example, the net worth of married men and women, it's more than double the average assets of the never married American or the divorced American. And so it's exactly what Beverly's talking about, because you've got economies of scale. You only have to pay one mortgage or one rent instead of two. You only have to buy 1 gallon of milk instead of 2, and when it might go spoiled in your individual fridges. So it is just basic economics. And that's what's fascinating too, is that even married couples with children at the end of their lives, they actually have a higher net worth, even if they had children. And that to me is really the miracle of economies of scale, and also just cooperation and just family economics. And so I thought that article was so simplistic and shallow in a lot of ways, because it didn't really provide the true perspective of the economics of a family. And the Federal Reserve also looked at younger families too, and they found that it was the same whether you're young and married or older and married. It's the same. Your net worth is very much higher combined, to even just slicing it in half and saying I'm a single person. And then to the question on poverty, I want to put up on screen. I wrote a piece for the New York Post that was looking at our programs and all of these government programs. My parents won welfare when I was younger. And so I've seen a lot of how these programs actually hurt the people that they're intended to benefit. And, they say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's what's really happening in our welfare programs. So there's just a couple of studies that I mentioned in this article, and we can put one of them up on screen that I'll talk through. And the first one, if we can put that up on screen, it talks about unconditional cash transfer. So it's basically free money, quote unquote, free money. And this study looked at, and you can see these researchers from Harvard, Exeter Business School, University of Exeter, really prestigious schools, and they basically tracked what happened when people got quote unquote free COVID money, and did it actually benefit them? And they found in the end, it actually did not. And in fact, it actually created more distress for the people who were getting this free, supposedly free money. And what's interesting is that these researchers were very liberal, and they tried to say, well, it's because they created the psychological stress of giving them just a little cheese, but not enough to make a permanent difference in their lives. But I would argue, as someone, again, who's been on welfare with my family and also received a lot of church welfare growing up, is that this sort of dependence on government programs actually creates a long-term trajectory that is really damaging to families. And the other study that I mentioned in the piece is looking at how it's called the marriage tax. Basically, it discourages marriage. Our welfare programs discourage marriage because once you've reached a certain threshold of income, if you have if you get married and your husband comes to live with you, then your income goes too high and you don't get the programs anymore. And so we're actually penalizing you once you're in the lower classes. You get penalized. And it's really, really unfortunate. And that's part of why we've seen the collapse, for example, of the African-American family. Before we had these programs under LBJ, we had more than 2/3 of Black children born into two-parent homes. And now we are 60 years later, and now it's the reverse, only about 25%. So I would argue that our government has done more to harm the Black family than pretty much any force that's happened culturally.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, post Reconstruction and some of the legal discriminatory policies that are now in no longer in place. But I would agree with you. The devastating impact of of welfare payments and the disincentive it creates for marriage. And we understand, based on the studies, that marriage is important for children. Two-parent household is important for the success of a lot of kids. That doesn't mean if you grew up in a single parent household that you're going to fall into trouble. You're going to have children out of wedlock. You're going to have trouble in school. But the likelihood increasing significantly in situations like that. I'm going to skip around just a little bit because I wanted to pick up on the idea of the penalties also. I think Carrie, you touched on like a penalty of marriage when it comes to tax welfare benefits, but I think there's also the tax side of this. So, I did a little digging, and I realized, and people have probably heard of this, which is the marriage penalty, particularly when it comes to taxes. And so, I mean, in essence, and this shouldn't be too surprising, your tax bill increases when you are two people who are married filing jointly. You're probably paying a higher tax rate those two individuals are paying a higher tax rate, particularly the second person, than if they were two individuals, two separate households filing as single individuals or as heads of household. And so, I mean, I don't think it's enough of a tax penalty to stop the formation of households and from people of getting married. But I think it's an unfair punishment in our tax code for, families, for two-parent households to really be successful. It's pretty significant when you consider just how large that tax penalty has been in the past. We did see that in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 kind of reduced some of that marriage penalty, but I think it still continues to be there. And for those who want to read a little bit more about it, our great Vice President of Policy, Hadley Heath, she actually wrote about the tax penalty, particularly for women, and how it affects those small business owners and entrepreneurs who get married. And how significant that marriage tax penalty is. So, just wanted to touch on that. But Beverly, would love for you to talk through, we've been talking about career, and I think a big part of this is the careers that women pursue. What is the impact? Talk a little bit about your own experience, but what are you seeing as the benefits and the trade-offs of these different career choices that women are making? And do you see career as a penalty or a payoff, or both?
Yeah, and I want to backtrack just a little bit. I just want to mention something you just mentioned about the marriage tax penalty. One of the first things I did when I was realizing things were serious with my now husband and our dating relationship was actually call my accountant, because I was like, well, what does this mean for business, and how I file taxes? And so I had this whole long conversation with him, because there were implications about adding another salary to the home, and what did that mean? And the other thing economically, I just want to point out that the Bloomberg article did not touch on, is the economic impacts of getting older in life and not having children to care for you. So one of the reasons I even moved away from DC during COVID was to be there with my parents as they got older. And there's so much financial benefit to older parents to have their children there to help care for them. And so I think as single women, if you don't have children and as you age, you can't expect nieces and nephews to necessarily take care of you. Even if you have children, there's no definite that they will. But there's a lot of consideration, especially as we are living longer in life. How are you going to provide for yourself long term when it may just be you making those decisions? So I just throw that out there as an economic
Good point.
aspect of it that people
Very
don't
good.
often think about, the end of life care and what does that
Yeah.
look like. But as far as my career, and I'll just share the advice I've given to other women. I mean, the reality is that many women are not single by choice. The majority of women who I know are single desire to get married. Yes, there is this trend of Generation Z talking about not wanting to get married, not wanting to have kids. So we do have that. But I would say with millennials, Generation X, there is this desire to be married. The best thing I can encourage women to do, it's what I did, which I actually think benefited me, is to work hard until that happens. And we never know if it will happen, if you will meet someone, if you will be a mom. We just don't know those things for sure. But to not wait for your life to start until that happens. So I can look back after spending my 20s and 30s working in a career that it has benefited me in being married in my 40s, that there has been this building of a business. So there's the financial side that you build up, but I'm also at that phase where I've built up a business and I've delegated, so I don't have to work as hard as I did in my 20s and 30s. So that's a nice thing to be able to do, to be able to focus more on family responsibilities, marriage responsibilities, even though I still do work hard. But there's been that other element. So I think an important thing for women to realize is in this period of singleness, the period of not being a mother, before I met my husband, I was really trying to think through, do I want to adopt as a single adult? Is that something that I can do? Because financially, there's a bigger responsibility when you know that I have to keep working, which means I have to have full-time daycare. So what does that mean financially for me if I chose to adopt later on in life? So there's just a lot of things to think through. But I would just say I'm really thankful for having the ability to be self-employed, which means that I'm living in an era where women have the right to do that. So I'm thankful for that. And I would also say that I'm so blessed because I also was of this age when technology allowed me to work from home. I think the technological advances that women have had in the past 10, 20 years has been instrumental. It's why we are seeing so many women start small businesses. Without technology, we wouldn't be able to do so. And of course, many of the women starting small businesses are mothers as well. They're able to do this part-time income or part-time work from home. And so my business has been telework ever since I started in 2008. IWF is telework. It helped us during COVID because we were already operating this way. So there wasn't that much of a change. And so I think the advancements in technology and women in the workplace is really, really beneficial to single women, as many of them do wait to meet a companion that they can share life with.
Carrie, would love for you to comment on that broader question about the benefits and trade-offs of career choices for women.
Yeah, no, I think that it's definitely a choice that everyone has to make in terms of, what's best for them. And Beverly's right that a lot of women are not single by choice, whereas the Bloomberg article seemed to imply that it was this easy breezy, anybody would want it all the time, who needs men kind of thing. And I just think that when you look at the end of your life, the vast majority of people who do get married and have children, they report a higher life satisfaction, that there is this more meaning. And I think for life, the way you develop meaning is through sacrifice and through the relationships that you build. And so the stronger relationships you can have at the end of your life, you will have lived a more meaningful life according to what people say, before, as Beverly touched on, the end of your life. And so I think that that's something that in our age of little 15-second TikToks and everything's just the next little news cycle buzz, that longer form thinking is really, unfortunately, de-emphasized. And I know for me, when I got my first job, I thought it was just so boring, like 401k, like what? Like, no, like, okay, I'll do that eventually. Like, I need that money now. Like, I've been poor for so long. Like, I want to spend some money, And so I didn't really develop anything in my 401k, and I didn't, and obviously we need to embrace the present and not be worried about the future and not beat ourselves up about the past either. But it's finding that balance. And I think that, again, that's something that certainly is not taught in our schools. There's several organizations that are all about financial literacy in schools. And there's an organization that tracks, and they do a map, I think every 2 years, the state of financial and economic literacy in America. Mm-hmm. You can rank and see where your state lies in terms of, it's a two-part thing. Does your state require the teaching of economics, the teaching of personal finance, or even just allow it or have the offering? And then do they require any form of accountability or testing around it? And once you get down to that level, there are sadly too few states that require any sort of accountability around it. And I think we're being distracted. Like we're between the learning loss and the focus on, these really divisive gender ideology issues in our K through 12, the kids are being left further and further behind. And that's part of why they take on student debt and take on these huge debt burdens that are just, an albatross around so many young people's neck. And that's part of why you see why young people say they're delaying having children or buying a home, is because of the student debt. So I think a lot of it, sadly, because it's not being taught in K through 12, a lot of it really has to start in the home. And as parents, teaching your kids and creating, for my nieces and nephews, I've got them all checking accounts and, been giving them the auntie, giving them the checks to put in and to teach them about savings. And I know their parents have all created education savings accounts for them, but I think getting the kids involved in that savings process is really important, because it's something they're only going to develop later on.
I think that's an important lesson just generally, and as you were talking, also something that Beverly touched on is the implications of when you lose your job. So for example, we've had a very robust economy and there have been tremendous opportunities for women to progress and to find the kind of work that they find fulfilling as well as financially rewarding. But, I would say we're in a recession given common definitions of a recession, but, lots of other people are saying, oh, it's looming, it's coming in 2023. I think it's an important for women to really consider how financially stable and strong that they are, and the benefit. Bring it full circle to what you talked about, Beverly, is there's something special about having another income in the household. And that's true for whether the husband or the one spouse loses their job and the other becomes the primary breadwinner for the household. And that kind of safety, internal home safety net, is something that doesn't happen when you're, when as a single woman. I know what it was like when I lost my job. I had to depend on my own savings and then hustle real hard to pick up a little job here until I got a full-time position. And so when you start to bring children into the situation and you're a single parent, then you have some serious challenges on your hand when you lose your job. And I think, Carrie, you touched on it earlier, which is where you start to see the dependence on the public social safety net, and that tending to be among single parents, particularly single mothers. So, Beverly, I know that you have a hard stop. I mean, I think we're bringing our conversation to a broader close, but before you jump off, is there anything final that you'd like to say about this topic?
Yeah.
Marriage and motherhood, is it a penalty or a payoff?
Yeah, I would say motherhood is something that many people find a noble thing, but also something, a really fulfilling thing. Very rarely do you hear people later in life say, well, I wish I didn't have kids. Many women who say, I wish I did. And so we're seeing this trend with Generation Z talking about whether or not they want to be parents. You even hear celebrities talk about, to save the planet, I'm not going to have children. I've actually wondered if one of the reasons why we're hearing this is because marriage is so elusive these days.
Mm.
Women thinking about finding a companion that's going to be a solid companion for them, just it seems like something that's not going to happen, or statistically, the odds are getting worse as time goes on. And I would say the thought of being a single parent is a hardship. So I admire single mothers, single
Yeah.
fathers out there. It's very hard. You were talking about, Patrice, not just losing your job as a single person and what that means, but when you add to that, you have children to take care of. That is just another hardship to go through. So I really admire women and men who choose to have children and care for them, even though they're doing it by themselves. So I've wondered if this desire to not be mothers coincides with the fact that marriage seems to be more elusive these days, and stats are showing that it's harder and harder to find someone who's compatible, and that could be a long-lasting relationship. But I think at the end of the day, whether you're a person of faith or not, I think most people feel that women were created to be mothers, and that is a good thing, and it's something that we desire, and most of us hope that it happens. And I think if we can change the way we talk about it, not just looking at it from an economic standpoint, which I don't even think is the full picture. Like you were saying, being married does add this other element of having a second income, but realizing that what matters in this world is not just about what you make. It's also about the value that you bring in the relationships that you build. At the end of the day, we think about those people we built relationships with and not how much money we made. So thank you for having me for this conversation. It's been great.
Beautifully said, Beverly. Thank you.
Thank
Carrie,
you.
final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what Beverly said. I think that it's not just about dollars and cents, although we want to have lots of sense and smart wisdom when we're managing our money. And I think that, I think that so when I worked for the AEI scholar, he and I would always have these debates of what comes first, culture or policy. And I would always say it was culture, and the culture drives policy. And he would always say, no, the policy drives the culture. I think that as a culture, in many ways, with the 1960s, it did bring some incredible things for women. The most basic things, like we could open a credit card, we could buy a car loan without having to get permission from our husband. And that's just things we take for granted. And I'm grateful for them. And it's sad that it got to that point, that those rights were taken away. But I think in some ways the pendulum swung so far that in many respects, the culture contributed to this idea that it's no big deal if you're a single mom. And I'm by no means am I here to shame single moms. I agree with Beverly. It is a very noble calling, especially when there is so much struggle and hardship. And if you are friends with a single mom, or you have a neighbor that's a single mom, I just encourage all of our viewers, just hug on them, love on them, support them, maybe
Give them a night off.
try to set them up with somebody good, make sure you vet them. But yeah, I think as a culture, we have to change how we have treated marriage. A lot of our pop culture, it makes men look to be stupid oafs, and insults the dad and just makes him to be this idiot, to be mocked. And I think that's really unfortunate. And that's part of why you have so many men who are not as marriage minded as before and aren't interested in settling down. That is a big problem why these women remain single and aren't able to find a partner, is because a lot of the men just aren't interested, or the policies, because the culture allowed these policies to be created. Because these policies that I mentioned earlier, that have now hurt families, especially lower income Black families, I believe those were all empowered or kind of accepted and became normalized through our culture. And so I think it's certainly going to take both policy and culture. And I think that's something that we could be talking about for many more episodes.
You are 100% right, Carrie. I think this discussion, we try to stay within the bounds of dollars and cents, but it absolutely bleeds into culture, it bleeds into education, it bleeds into all of the other centers at IWF and the work that we do, because it's important that we have women's empowerment and women's freedom and choices, but we also have to understand what else is going on in the world. What's going on with men? Have we set men behind? Have we set boys behind, as we've pushed women forward and pushed girls forward? And I think there's a little bit element of that. And I think there's probably been an IWF event talking about boys and girls in school, but This has been great. I hope that everybody walks away with the understanding that, there is no penalty. I mean, there's a little bit of a tax penalty for marriage, but it's not better or worse to be married financially than to be single. It's not worse to have children or than to be childless. I mean, the dollars and cents are one thing, but I think Beverly said it right. There's still so much more to it. There's the personal value, there's the fulfillment, there's the internal desire that we have as women, and those should not be discounted. And so, as you see articles that glorify one type of lifestyle over another and try to push women into this bucket, definitely be skeptical, because there's always another side to the story. So, Carrie, thank you for joining me today, as always.
Thank you, Patrice.
All right. And thank you to our IWF CEO viewers. We appreciate you joining us for today's policy chat. We try to do these every month. I hope you thought this was insightful, informative. Maybe it even challenged some of your thinking a little bit. If you want to sound off, I mean, Carrie, Beverly, and I are on Instagram. You can follow us on Instagram. You can find us at IWF, and you can get to our Instagrams. And let's talk a little bit more about this topic. Is it a penalty or a payoff to be married and to be a mother in this world? In addition, we have another way for you to sound off: Independent Women's Network. IWN. That's where myself, my colleagues, we are always hanging out. We're having these continued discussions. You can have discussions with other members. We have in-person meetings, probably in your state, maybe even in your town, or you can do it virtually. But join us at IWNetwork.com. That's IWNetwork.com. You can activate your free pass or get a higher membership level, but it just gives you access to a community of like-minded people, even some people you might disagree with, but a place where you will not be canceled. And finally, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, The Pointer. Go to iwf.org/CEO. You've got the sign up right there. You'll get our alerts, you'll get our updates, you'll get our analysis, you'll see our video clips on TV, on radio, all the good stuff we're putting out. So until next month, until next time, I hope that you will be well, you will strive, and you will thrive. Thanks for tuning in.